Record to the cloud. We are now recording, and I just want to say welcome, folks. And we got a treat tonight. We're going to have Douglas Lindsey, someone I have worked with before, volunteered with in Prince George's County Aries Races, and he's going to talk to us about his experience. He is, I've got a little blurb here about him. He's a career emergency management specialist, Federal Emergency Management Agency Homeland Security exercise, and evaluation program certified, he's experienced in conducting reviews on continuity of operations and planning and developing critical infrastructure evaluation criteria with the application in the National Incident Management System techniques operated during the federal and state declared disasters, national security special events, utilizing UAVs, drones, ooh, that's so cool, for telecommunications sites and assets inspection, mapping, and survey. Woo. Involved with, wow, I can't even do all these acronyms here. Federal government radio systems, IT security, NOAA weather radio, and some of the data on this chart is actually coming from NOAA. FAA special flight rules area certification, Project Management Institute, PMP certification. I need to go for that. FEMA Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation certified. FEMA Agency Communications Unit Leader #3 certified. FEMA Professional Development Series Standards of Excellence in Emergency Management. Wow. So without further ado, we're just going to go on and get started with Doug. Like I said, I worked with him before. He led at one point Aries Races, and you should have read the chapter by now that talks about what Aries and Races do. And so we're just going to open it up for a discussion. I'm going to stop sharing this rather distracting thing here, and I'm going to start off, Doug, asking you about your origin story. I'm sort of in addition to being a ham, I'm sort of a comic book fan. So all people in comic books have an origin story. What's yours? How did you get started?
Hey, good evening, everybody. So I got started, and it was with comic books. I used to draw pictures of Speed Racer and Ultraman. So you can Google that. And what really got me started in radio was basically hearing shortwave radio. And my uncles served in the military in different components, and they were radio operators. And so I listened to their stories. So my first radio was a toilet paper tube crystal radio. The next upgrade to that was I found a radio in a trash, shortwave radio.
Really?
Put it together, burnt up some stuff, and figured out I need to learn what electronics is. So that, between that and building model airplanes began my quest for technology. Back in the ancient times of the 70s, I had to go to the FCC to take my amateur radio test. So back then you had to know 25 words per minute Morse code. And you had to pass that, and you had to pass 150 question test.
Oh, wow, that's right.
To get your novice. And it was really intense. So here I am, a kid with his paperboard money, going down to the FCC headquarters in DC because I didn't know about radio clubs. The only other people that were giving the test was the FCC. So sitting in the hallway with gentlemen that aren't like me, wondering what's a black kid doing there. Yeah, really intense situation. So they actually had me take the test 3 times. I passed all 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah, so they didn't believe I passed the test. So
So they were looking under the table and trying to see.
yeah, they thought I had the answers written on it. So matter of fact, I don't know if I can pull it out. I got it right here. My slide rule from high
Oh
school.
yeah. Wow. I have one of those.
I had this doing my math. There were no calculators back then. I had
Wow.
my slide rule doing my math, and they looked at me and they thought something was up. You know, maybe the NAACP sent this guy down here. We don't know.
That's funny. That is something. That is something. Yeah. One of these days I'll tell a story about how I passed an exam with a slide rule. I still have it somewhere. It's my lucky slide rule. It got me through an exam. I didn't think I would make it. Both calculators failed. I pulled out the slide rule and I've got through the exam. So it's my
Well,
lucky
see,
charm.
back then I couldn't afford a calculator. The
Ah,
TI was it 33, the door stop.
yep, yep.
And there were a couple of kids in school. I went to a Catholic school. There were a couple of kids in school that could afford one, but I just happened to have a slide rule because somebody in the family that was an engineer had one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I bought one. I bought mine on sale. They were getting rid of them because calculators were coming in
Hmm.
when I was in school, college. And so I bought one just to play with, and it turned out saving my bacon on the exam.
So the other
So,
thing I do is I'm working on my commercial rating as a pilot. I'm also a
okay.
commercial drone pilot, but um, back in the day when you got your pilot's license, you had to use the whiz wheel, which is basically a slide rule in a circular form.
Oh,
And
I
so
think I've seen those. Yeah.
I got one around here somewhere, but I've
Okay.
used that. And matter of fact, 2 years ago when I was doing for my recertification, they looked at me, "You're using a whiz wheel?" I'm like, "Yeah, batteries don't run out and the numbers don't erase." So,
Short of fire, it's gonna be
but
pretty
dropping
good.
it while you're flying. And
Right. It's gonna work.
but my interest in amateur radio really peaked about the time that the Cuban Missile Crisis took off, because back then, if you had a long piece of wire, you could listen to Sputnik and you could listen to the comms between the naval ships and the Russian ships and the Russian embassy, which was downtown in DC.
Huh.
So, I was swinging the dial, picking all that up on a multi-band shortwave AM/FM radio. Um, One of the big world band radios. You
Okay, I
like
think I've
like a
seen.
Grundig or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I actually had a Lafayette 600A. It's a boat anchor. It's in my closet over here, but it's huge. You're right.
I had a smaller tabletop one, and then I found books. Well, so back before the internet, you had to go to the library. So I was
Oh,
always the kid, and I checking out books or copying down stuff, or well, I didn't have enough money to run the Xerox to copy, so I had to write everything down. So that I had notebooks upon notebooks of stuff I read. I was a poor student in school, but I studied hard when I studied electronics.
huh. Okay.
So copying all this stuff down, and then there was the Popular Mechanics and the Popular Electronics magazines.
Oh yeah, I
And they
remember them.
always had diagrams on how to build stuff. a Morse code oscillator. So there you go. Practice my Morse code. How to build a single band radio, 70 meter. And then it was like, wait a minute, I need an amateur radio license. So back then, the ARRL manual for studying for your test was about 2 inches thick, not the little pamphlet like right now. So I studied that. I ended up taking the test, got my FCC license back in 76, 77, and been at it ever since.
Mm,
Uh,
okay.
I was the section emergency coordinator for Maryland, DC,
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. Yeah.
and the first and only one of us to do that.
Okay. So why don't you? I know the young folks they're going through the tech manual, so they're probably at chapter 4 right now, right? Anyway, at probably up to chapter 4. So you might want to fill them in about what a section manager does, because they've read about Aries and that kind of thing. So you
Okay.
might want to tell them about that. Yeah.
Sure. So, section emergency coordinator is the guy that operates as the technical, legal, and operational manager between the government, the volunteer resources, and then the what we call the radio world, whose spectrum it's on. So you come up with coordinating what frequencies, coordinating who's talking to who, how we're going to pass messages, who's going to get these messages. And I supported the federal, state, and the local EOCs, emergency operations centers, with okay, here's what the amateur radio is going to provide for you: the radio communications plus the data side of that. When we were doing a packet or APRS, sending reports on like down in La Plata after the tornado, the damages, the
Oh, yeah.
scope of damages, uh, the needs for Red Cross shelters, the needs for police departments, fire departments, and such. And what that did was take the load off of the traditional emergency management frequencies. And if you look at your FCC study manual, the reason why we have these frequencies is to support the national, state, and local and tribal
Mm,
um, emergency capabilities should there be a need to provide communications to support these assets.
mm. Well, that's important. That's important. I mean, I'm thinking, particularly right now with what's going on in Turkey, uh, and the devastating earthquake that took place. And I saw you talked about frequency management. The students actually had, we actually had Dr. Chris Dupuy, who talked about frequency management from the perspective of radio telescopes. And so now we're hearing about frequency management that has to do with emergency services and that kind of thing. And so that sort of fills in the picture. Um, so speaking about frequency management, there was a QST, which is an all amateur alert to stay away from certain frequencies because they're being used right
Right
now to.
now, there's some parts of the 70, the 40 meter, I'm sorry, the 40 meter band and the 10-meter band, which are being used for disaster relief in. I don't know if Syria has actually given their amateurs the ability to go back on the air. I know before the Syrian
Oh,
war, they were active, um, but maybe they might be able to come back on air because of the warfare going on there.
oh, I forgot about that.
But yeah, 40 meters and 10 meters, um, and you could probably eke it out, and there'll probably be some transmissions on 20 meters, the intercontinental Western Asian kind of communications. But it's very important if you hear that just to listen and not interrupt or key down or um, but so we are blessed in the United States with the ability to have the spectrum that we have. Many of those frequencies that we use are actually frequencies that other countries use for their military. So that's another reason for radio discipline.
Okay.
And when we think about like our local repeaters on 2 meters, the signal still travels around the world and somebody will still intercept it. So radio discipline and knowing exactly when and how to speak is a big deal, not to cause interference. And there's still Morse code, and you'll probably hear a lot of that as they go through the rubber reclamation in Turkey.
Okay.
A lot of the needs will be sent by Morse code because it's low power and it's efficient.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
we have a
there are a great many of ham operators that are in those apartments. So I wouldn't be surprised if these guys pull up at a parking lot somewhere and start operating.
hmm,
They did that in Nicaragua, Mexico when they had the floods and the mudslides, and that was part of the disaster medical team. That was who I communicated with, and then relayed that back to the federal government.
okay. You are you in the the medical team?
I did 13 years with the disaster medical team.
Oh, okay. I thought so. Yeah.
Everything from Katrina, 9/11, all the way up to about Maria. And
Wow.
before COVID, I had resigned my commission after COVID.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
But,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then a
Cool.
lot of work with FEMA and a lot of work with USAID. I did search
Okay.
and rescue. I was the communications commander actually.
Oh, wow.
So I did the DoD, the federal, and the amateur spectrum coordination and operations.
Okay. Okay. That's cool. Well, so Leonie Anderson has a question here. Oh, it says, is the alert because of the earthquakes? Yes. That's the alert warning. I think it's from I think it's region 1 of the ITRU. Yeah, that says all amateurs, you can listen, but don't transmit on these frequencies because of the rescue effort in Turkey. So yeah, that that it's interesting. I remember, I think it was during Katrina that I'm here. I'm actually near, not too far from Andrews Air Force Base. And I remember fooling around on the radio because every time I hear about an emergency, I turn on my radio. And
Mhm.
so I was fooling around and this booming signal came out. I think it was over one of the emergency maritime frequencies from Andrews Air Force Base. And I didn't even realize that they had amateurs there, but they had set up a station. They checked into one of the emergency nets and offered to provide assistance. And it was a loud signal. I mean, I'm right up against the base. So the meter was all the way over. Uh, Oh, if someone oh, okay. If someone transmits, Leanie's asking, does their license get revoked?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you're not involved in the disaster, right? And to me, it's oh, oh, there you go.
So,
Thanks.
so what happens is it's called malicious interference. Um, so one, if I call um, the station, let's say we're in a QSO right now, like we're doing on this Zoom conference, and somebody jumps in. If we don't acknowledge that we're talking to them also, that's seen as malicious interference. So there is another way you can get in if you have pertinent information for that party, and that is giving your call sign, and then saying the words break, break, break. And then if they come back and acknowledge you at your call sign, you give your disposition, and they will say, okay, yes, continue the conversation with us, or they will politely say this frequency is in use for emergency operations. or somebody would be blunt and direct and say cease and desist. So, but for the most part, we have what's called ROs that listen to all the frequencies, especially during disasters, and they can pick out those interfering stations or malicious intents and stuff like that. And they can basically track your signal to wherever you're located, find out what zip code you're in, and you get a pink card that says on this date you've caused interference. And it's like soccer, 2 pink cards is a red card. And the next thing
Oh,
you know, you're getting a subpoena, a summons from the FCC or the NTIA, and then a subpoena to appear in court.
wow.
And it won't be, because they've got the recording. You can't dispute, hey, it wasn't me. Case in point, that happened in January 6th. We're still doing a lot of litigation on folks on January 6th. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
that was the illegal use of amateur radio at that time.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think I remember 2 stations, 2 repeaters shut down in the area because of so many illegal transmissions. And they shut them off to basically protect themselves from legal action.
Right. As a trustee of a repeater, you're responsible for what goes over your radio. Yep. So that's why I've not become a trustee, because paperwork. But so the other thing that drove me in amateur radio was we had a lot of science tech classes way back in the day when I was in high school. But nobody really, we had the one radio station in high school, but that was like the Mr. Merlin kind of, only special people could touch that. And I'm like, well, why are they special people? So I showed up one day in my school. I went to a Catholic school, and here's my amateur radio license. I'd like to operate. Of course, there was dead silence, and I had to be supervised on how to operate I believe it was a Holocrafter radio.
Oh, wow.
And I basically said, your antenna's out of SWR. Here's how you fix the antenna. I'm in the club. So I've been the only one a lot of times in this career track.
Hmm.
You know, the first one or the only one, or so
Hmm.
I think that's what also helps me persevere in this field. It's,
Okay. Well, that's cool. That's cool. Thanks for that. What's your favorite thing to do now with ham radio?
I am what's called a DX, or distance chaser.
Oh,
I go for that station that you can just barely hear, that's on the other side of the planet. I've worked stations from Bowie, Maryland to um, Soweto, South
oh,
Africa,
wow.
um, let's see, New Guinea, Ireland. Where's our buddy? OS Finland,
Oh, Finland. Yeah, yeah.
Finland
You worked it. Yeah. Oscar Hotel
8.
3. Yeah, Oscar Hotel 8. Something November. Hmm.
So he's an
You
expat
worked him?
in Finland.
Huh. Yeah, interesting character. Yeah.
I ran across some family members. I have part of my family's down in Panama,
Oh,
and
okay.
I worked them. And I actually, when I went to Panama a few years ago to a family function, uh, that was interesting walking around because they thought I was the government guy.
Why is that?
Well, we got United States, we've got the best radios, the best equipment, and you come down there with a shiny brand new 817, and yeah, it was impressive. I've worked special event stations like the Wright Brothers Memorial
Oh,
in
wow.
2003 at the hangar where the Wright brothers actually had their equipment stored.
Ah,
The Pearl Harbor Memorial I worked at several times,
Oh, wow.
and I got my name on the list to operate off of a Liberty ship out of Baltimore. Um, Hopefully, I could do that this spring.
What is a livery ship?
The Liberty
Liberty.
ships are cargo ships that the U.S. built, basically like quick and fast during World War II.
Hmm.
And the John Brown is the last Liberty ship that is in working condition out of
Huh.
Baltimore Harbor. And so I hope
Huh.
the first one of us as a radio operator on that ship.
Wow. Huh. Interesting. Huh, I didn't know anything about those. Okay. So you like chasing DX. Have you been doing anything with Parks on the Air?
Every once in a while, but I'm reconfiguring my kit
Okay.
since the 878 is no longer in production.
Oh, yeah.
So other things I've done is work the ISS, the International Space Station, with a handheld radio and an antenna, a Yagi antenna in hand.
Oh, really?
I've worked that several times from the backyard and from other places where I just stop and park and um, call the ISS. I actually worked at APRS back when my call sign was KB3HER,
Oh, okay.
back when I was in
Okay.
Cheltenham.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
Huh. Yeah, we want to connect. We were hoping to connect with with the ISS, with the International Space Station. There are education programs and that get
mhm,
schools connected, and so the National Radio Astronomy Observatory technically is an educational institution.
mhm.
So we're trying to figure out what it takes to get to make that happen. But it might be cool just to stand there with a circularly polarized antenna and an HT and work the thing, work the ISS. I understand they have a repeater on the.
The repeater is on and off, depends on their workload.
Oh, okay,
There
okay,
is also a split band transceiver where you go 2 meters in and 70 out.
okay.
Um, that's depending on workload, but they do have regular up down communication in there. So what you do is you find the satellite pass when it's coming over you, and you got to work it from horizon to horizon because soon as you hear it, thousand other people will hear it, and it's like everybody rushing for the door.
Right. Pile up, as we say on the
It's
radio. Okay.
definitely, yeah. But it's once you get in and they give your call sign back, because every transmission on the spacecraft is recorded. So you become part of the federal record
Oh,
for having communicated with the spacecraft.
oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
another
yeah.
thing I used to do was I used to be a downrange tracker for NASA when they did their launch missions. I
Okay.
support Goddard Space Station.
Oh, okay.
So whenever they had like, I think the last mission I did was the Challenger.
Okay.
So when they call around the world, the different stations that could hear, listening stations, and get my call sign standing by.
Huh.
And as the craft orbited, you could reach in. Okay, checkpoint. Right, we have mark time and all that kind of stuff.
Huh. Wow. That sounds like fun. I'm gonna have to do that.
And then when they had when the rocket blew up,
Oh,
it was everybody downrange, secure your radios, and I actually had an Echo Link channel and my radios going. And I could secure it this time, mark time. Then we had to write a whole thing about what did you hear, what did you see,
oh, wow. Yeah, that was something.
and the
Huh.
guys from Arizona, Texas, really, because they saw the debris field.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Yeah, I found the person's site. It's Oscar Hotel 8 Sierra Tango November.
Yep, Julian.
Julian.
Julian the Marine. Julian the Marine. Yes.
Yeah. It looks like he's got a few new videos. I'll share the link with everybody in the chat.
He's got, if you look at his YouTube postings, it's some really good, interesting material. Sometimes he's long-winded, but it's some good material.
Oh yeah, I saw. I think he had one thing about making battery strings, making your own rechargeable battery string,
Yes.
and that was really cool. And it's one of those things that's on my list to do, is to build one of those battery things, battery strings, because I thought that was really cool. And he takes you step by step through the process and that kind of stuff. He's like, to me, he's like Inspector Gadget. He's got the best,
Oh yeah,
the
he's
best
got the
stuff.
toys. He has, but the whole premise is, he emphasizes, is for area-wide communication loss, or loss of comms. We were able to transmit independent of the dial tone, independent of the internet, independent of the satellite, which is a practice that we'd like to have more people prepared to do. Like I said, today there was a solar disruption of communication systems and GPS. But it could be wide area outages. It could be something as simple as, like in Texas, where the ice storms cause power
Yeah.
outages. And I actually operated then to do backup for stations in Texas and Louisiana.
Huh.
Um, there were instances where there's area-wide flooding, tornadoes. I'm also a National Weather Service Skywarn watcher and reporter. So at one point I was chasing tornadoes, and that was fun until you really run up on one. And kind of
Yeah.
wonder why those people in Spain run with the bulls until you end up running with the bulls, and then you're like, oh, never mind.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I used to watch the Storm Chaser thing on the History Channel a while back, and these guys had these steel reinforced uh cars and stuff like this, big slabs of metal around the daggone thing, you know,
We
and
were we were in we were in a Suburban, and when the front windows got knocked out, okay, this ain't fun no more. Hail that big.
wow.
When the downburst hit, it was hail that big, and they were like, "Well, what else do you see? We see us turning around."
Exactly right, right. That's
I'm
great.
I'm not the guy. I'm not Jim Cantori. I'm not the weather guy.
I watch those guys on the Weather Channel. It's like, really? It's, it's like, I'm holding on to this
Yeah,
sign to keep from being blown away.
I've been in a couple of hurricanes, and no, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else you like? Any other favorite things you like to do with ham radio?
Um, when I travel, I usually carry some type of radio with me. So I got, when I was on cruises a few years ago in the Caribbean, going to different islands and operating, and actually meeting emergency managers down there,
Oh,
and showing them how with 5 watts of radio I could reach back to the stateside or to another island, and then just running across amateurs and just talking about radio.
okay. Yeah.
Oh,
The stories. Fish fishermen have fishing stories about the ones that got away.
Right.
And we have stories about the DX that got away, you know.
I
Like,
talked to Japan with only 2 watts.
right. And then you go outside, the antenna's on the ground under the snow, you know, stuff like that. A lot of storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it's kind of obvious, but how did ham radio help you with your career?
So it was multi-phased. So being technically inclined and electronically inclined, I ended up doing avionics and installing communication systems in the military,
Oh,
and then doing it for public safety. And then I started my own firm to do small contracts for like police departments and stuff like that. The other side of that was in emergency management, um, because I could translate technical stuff to the powers that be, as opposed to making it seem like it's Mr. Wizard kind of stuff. I would always be the go-between about, well, what's our communication situation? And and then I said I did a great deal of emergency management, planning, operations, testing, um, basically understanding how the human works with equipment.
oh,
You can be a technical genius, but an operational failure.
mm,
Genius and be a technical failure.
mm,
So there's some intersections where man and machine you kind of gotta negotiate.
mm. So you're doing writing or
Writing, I did teaching and instructing.
okay.
Um, everything from this is a radio, this is the push to talk, to why we had so many code plugs and talk groups and stuff like that, to here's what you need to really say in an emergency situation. I've worked with emergency dispatchers, uh, and people in the field to get them to understand that you're on the same team, not one side of the radio is better than the other. And then a lot of instruction in the military. Uh, this is how you use the equipment and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. I remember explaining to there's another person I mentor, um some a little bit older. He's a little bit older than the students in this class, but one of the things I've been saying to him is he's an engineering student. I said, when I was in engineering school, 80% of what we did was right. And 20% was technical. The rest of it was writing stuff clearly so people could understand what is going on and that kind of thing.
Absolutely right. I got a meme that I posted on my Facebook page one time. It said engineers always make something that they don't have to fix. And technicians always make something that always breaks.
Ah,
And I think engineering is the process of solving a human interface problem. I don't look at it as ones and zeros, right? What does the human need to do with that technology?
mm,
And if it's too complicated for the human to interface with it, then it's a failure. I don't care how great it runs in
mhm.
the lab. When we get in the field, and I've had that experience, we were deployed, and I'm like, throw that radio away. Here's what we're going to do: stretch out a long piece of wire. And I'm explaining antenna theory using pieces of wire from a Cat5 cable.
Mm,
Yeah, that was. Then you have to translate that, and because I had to write it up, translate
mhm.
that command. How come you stripped Cat5 antenna? I mean, Cat5 cable and made an antenna out of it? Don't we have antennas? Well, sat antennas don't work in this hemisphere because here's why. And
Oh,
you yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. I've always been fascinated. The magic for me, and I don't know if this was true for you. I'm sure it is though. is how you can take a piece of wire and hook it up, and you hook it up right, and you turn on the radio, and now you're talking to someone, could be around the block or on the other side of the world.
It
That's
never ceases to amaze me. Never. I mean, turn the radio on. And so, okay, so down, part of my time I grew up down in North Carolina, down in the eastern part of Carolina, below Elizabeth City. And we were on a farm. And so there weren't many resources when we were growing up. And there was always the radio. And tuning in the radio, just that whistle blip, and then getting some intelligence, some voice or something. Like, there's a radio station out of Chicago. There's a radio station out of Texas. It just, that's what set me like, okay, when I found out that I could be able to talk back to something like that, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, it's just magic. It's just like, I just took this piece of wire, I had it in my junk box, and I just stretched it out, threw it over a tree, right? And then run the cable back into the house, and then put the counterpoise out, or maybe I use, at one time when I was a kid, I used we had steam heat.
Yes,
So
you did.
the ground for my antenna was the radiator in my bedroom, okay?
I got in trouble for filing the paint off of it so I could get a better contact. Yeah.
Well, so I sort of somewhat cheated. I used the area around, if memory serves, the area around the valve,
Yeah.
because that was rubbed kind of clean, and you could make a good electrical connection with the clamp on that thing.
Yep.
The only time I would get in trouble is when I'd interrupt Dad's TV.
Done that too.
Then we had problem, but other than that, we were good. And he actually helped me set up the antenna, which is cool. And the story about that thing is, they had sold the house. Parents had sold the house, moved to Louisville, retired, and so anyway, I'm still living in New Jersey at this time, and I ran into someone who actually owned the house that I used to live in. In a weird kind of way, they were a postal worker, and actually they were helping me through the window. And she said, "Didn't you used to live?" She knows my name. "Didn't you used to live at 48 Madison?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well," she said, "You know what? One of the bedrooms, there's this wire that comes out of the bedroom." And it goes to a tree, and then it goes to another tree. And I started laughing just like you did. And she says, "What is that for?" I said, "Look," I said, "first of all, I'm amazed that thing is still up there after 20 years.
Wow, that is something.
All right. But Dad is Army Corps of Engineers. Okay. And so he put springs on the thing, so that as the trees blew,
Sway, yes.
it would sway, and the springs would it would keep the wire taut,
Yeah.
and without breaking. And so that thing had been up there 20 years. And I said to her, "Look, you could just take it down. Just take it. Go ahead, take it down."
One for the record book.
But I was like, "Good grief, that thing is still up there." So that magic, just taking a piece of wire, and that I remember getting it was from an antenna kit that I got from Radio Shack. Just that magic really is what sold me on ham radio, that you could do that. And over here I've got a bunch of antennas that I've built and that kind of thing since then. But that you just can't beat that, to me, that you could cobble together something on your desk and fool around and make something, and now you're talking to someone in Ireland. It's like, really? It's like,
Mine was also when you did Morse code.
Oh, yes.
The dots and dashes actually, once you got in the rhythm of sending code, it was like just amazing. You could pick it out of all the hash and all the noise atmosphere.
Yes.
You can still pick it.
Yes.
It's still a viable means of communication, and even though we're an internet-based world now.
Well, it's so funny to me. That I think in a lot of ways Morse code is more popular now that hams are not required to have it than it was before. You know, and the other thing that I think, and so I should say, the folks in this the students in this class are going to learn Morse code. And I think I've said this before, and I'm just going to reiterate that it's not required for your license, but daggone it, it sure is fun. You know what I'm saying? And so we're gonna help you learn Morse code and get started. And if you want to practice, you can get more proficient and that kind of thing. But just to relate a story, a quick one. There's If you look on the internet, there's someone who's taken a straight key. Oh, and I see. Oh, there are other languages. All right, I'll get to your besides Morse. So, you want to handle that, Doug, before
Mhm.
I go into my story mode? I'm going to handle it just a little bit, Leonie. So one time, a long time ago, I was copying Morse code. The way when you receive Morse, you usually have a pad in front of you, or you're actually typing as the person is sending the code. In this case, I didn't understand what I was receiving at first, and there were characters that I was not familiar with. And as I was typing, as I was writing the code from the person transmitting, I was actually copying in Spanish. They were sending the Morse code, the international Morse code. They were sending Spanish language in international Morse code. So, and the characters I didn't recognize were the characters that had accents in the code. So, and Doug has answered your question as well. So you can use Morse code for different languages. It's not necessarily a language in and of itself.
So internationally, like aviation, internationally we use English or American, excuse me, as the language. But let's say, like for me, I find a Spanish speaking station and I might start with perdóname and then enter into, guy goes, you speak Spanish? Yeah. And then we end up, our conversation is in Spanish. Same with Morse code. We do the international language of English, and then you get personal with the guy and you say, hey, I see your, Canary Islands, speak Spanish. And then the next thing you know, we're speaking. There's actually the Navajo code talkers have a net, and it's real interesting to hear those guys speak Navajo.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. I think their event is in August, I think, annually.
I've latched on to them last year. Matter of fact, I was out at Window Rock flying a drone, demonstrating how we could use drones to support hospitals.
Oh wow.
And I met a handful of code talkers, and they said, "You're a radio guy." I went and saw their equipment, and I know enough Navajo to say that I'll get myself in trouble. So that's a work in progress. That's something else I want to learn.
Wow, that is so cool. Yeah, we would love to. I think there's one or two students who are indigenous in this program, and I'd love to connect with the code talkers. Um, and I'll see what we can do about getting involved in the event. We may not be. I think the event happens. I think it's in August. Um, at the very least, we can listen. We can listen in.
But there's
Uh,
also, so there is the like Puerto Rican, the Dominican, the Mexican, and Panamanian radio nets that sometimes you can hear.
hmm.
And it's so the guys in New York and Miami will tell the guys in Puerto Rico all the latest news. Who's doing what, who married who. The guys in Panama will be calling like Florida and DC and New York. And hey, when you come down, make sure you bring this, that, and the other. Um, the guys in Mexico, my neighbor is actually Mexican, and talked to his folks, arranging when we're coming down, who got married, who, and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. It's kind of fun. It's like, you take turns on the phone back in the ancient days where you only had one phone in the house and nobody had cell phones. Everybody took a turn at the phone.
Yeah, that's cool. That is really cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's great to have another language at your disposal. That has got to be definitely cool. Well, I think you answered some of this during your talk, but I just want to hone in on how you've dealt with or deal with discrimination on or off the air.
It's so here's the thing. Um, you can't take it personal. You gotta use it for fuel to make you understand that there are people, things, and forces way beyond your reach and control.
Mm,
And most people, when they doing discriminatory things, it's out of one, ignorance. The other part is fear. Okay.
mm,
They think that they own spectrum. Nobody owns the radio spectrum, and that they have a right to be on that radio, on that frequency. Nobody has that right to.
mm,
All globally, all communications are open to anybody. So what I've used it is fuel to. So when I was a general class, and they said, "Well, you need to be an extra class," I went and got my general radio operator's license, and then that gave me fuel to get my general radio operator's license, the big FCC license,
mm,
and then it fueled me to pass my master's courses in the Navy. And because I'd already had this groundwork as a kid, going to tech school was basically a cakewalk for me.
huh,
So a lot of times when they would say, "Oh, you don't know this and that," and the other, I'm like, "I already done that. I have a document from the government that says I already know this." Um, and I've experienced it on the job lots of times where you thought you had the promotion, you thought you did a good job, only to turn around and train somebody else so that they could be
mm,
your boss. Um, those things are like the tide; they come and go. They
mm,
they shouldn't wear you out, wear upon you. What they should do is serve as, you know what, I'm going to be that one better than you.
mm,
If I got to learn 25 words a minute, I'm gonna learn 30. You see, um, I've had guys even here in Maryland, local on the local repeater when I came on the air years ago, before they realized I was a section emergency coordinator. What are you doing on this channel? Meaning, yeah, some of the people that we know, Jason, some of the people
oh
that
boy,
we know.
I think I know.
What are you doing here? And then when they saw I worked as a professional firefighter and a paramedic in this county,
Mm,
and I was one of the first paramedics in this county. And then they will,
wow.
"What are you?" "Well, here's my background," and they look, and then they'll fact check and they'll look you up in the FCC. "Oh, he's that class radio operator. Well, what's he doing on our repeater?" "Well, he is the AWI, the first and only black section emergency coordinator for Maryland, DC since forever." And especially when I went to Western Maryland, well, who's the emergency coordinator? That guy? So when you encounter discrimination, when you encounter somebody that's slighting you, understand that they're operating out of an area of fear,
Mm,
and not to make them feel good about themselves. But what you do is you don't respond. You don't buy into it. You don't
mm.
get excited, upset, dismayed. All you can do is kind of shake your head, smile politely, and go, "Wow, you really don't know me." You And so matter of fact, I was the emergency coordinator for the Navy Marine Corps Mars for Maryland, DC, and Delaware. And first and only Black guy in the Navy Mars program. And I've met with a lot of folks that were not welcoming.
Mm.
So the way I won them over was being consistent, being who I am. And then eventually, I guess they saw either I wasn't a threat or they were tired of just trying to get poke at me. So,
I
but
think that's
you're in technology, especially the technology field, it's highly competitive. It's highly. And I say this because I've seen it in other countries where other pilots or people in technology are competing for these jobs or for these skill sets. And even amongst, let's say, even amongst the same type of people,
hmm
there is fear and resentment.
hmm
Okay,
Yep.
it's not just us and them. It could be your own people. It could be your own type, your own
Yep.
class.
Right.
Most people operate out of fear,
Mm.
ignorance. Preconceived notions of what you are when they don't know you as a person. So I love the challenge personally. I like it when people come to the conferences and I'm speaking and they look at me on the podium. I feel like the current Secretary of State.
Right.
I met him. He's a big dude. He's big as I am. He's and you like
Oh, really? What's his name
Secretary
again?
Lloyd Austin.
Oh, Lloyd Austin. Okay. Oh, now I remember who. Oh, yeah.
And
I
he
remember him.
walks in and the Secretary of State's here and they're looking this way and got to look up.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I forgot about him. Yeah, yeah. Let's see, we're almost at the top of the hour. And I was just wondering if anyone has any more questions. I think looks like a lot of folks had to leave early. So Logan, do you have any questions?
No, I joined a little late, so I'm sorry about that. So I didn't catch your whole talk. I was in a chemistry lab. It ran a little bit late.
Oh, no
But
problem. No problem.
what
No
I did
problem.
catch was really cool and interesting. I did have one question though. You were talking about Cat5 cable and just using that as like an antenna,
Yes.
or how would you go about doing that? Because I worked in a networking business as like an internship, so
Huh?
I worked a lot with that, and so I was kind of interested in that.
Okay. So there are two formulas. One is for full wave and one is for quarter wave. Like I think it's 164, no, 464 divided by the wavelength will give you the length of the antenna. So what you do is you got 100 feet of cable, strip the shell off of it, pull out two wires, and make it to that wavelength. And then you connect those wires one side to the ground and then one side to the feed, and you have an antenna right off the bat.
Oh wow. Oh, I guess I never
You can
thought
do
about
it. You can
that.
actually do it for satellite. Take a 6-inch piece of Cat5, and because the frequencies need a shorter antenna, like a 70 centimeter or like a 1.2, they're only a couple inches long.
Yeah.
You can actually pull it apart and then cut. I wish I had a piece of Cat5. I'll show you right quick. Um, you can make a quick and dirty. So back before we had all these router antennas and stuff, that's how I used to make antennas for the routers.
Oh wow. Yeah.
If
Oh.
something broke, so imagine when you're deployed, there's no shop to go to, there's no Amazon.com.
Yeah.
So I would calculate what, we were on 2.4 or 4.8 or whatever, and I'd take a piece of Cat5 and make a cat whisker antenna out of it.
Oh. That's something I never thought you could do. Thank you for telling me about that.
It comes from my days of sniffing out the Wi-Fi's and stealing Wi-Fi's.
Makes sense.
Ah, war driving, eh?
You gotta make a Pringles can antenna, and then you point the antenna at people's Wi-Fi, and you get the signal.
Hmm.
We used to ride around all day finding people's Wi-Fi's and getting in on it.
That's something that my dad was kind of telling me about. He works for the company. That's how I got the internship. We had our Wi-Fi exposed for like the longest time, just kind of like an open thing. As soon as he started working there, he'd bring home all this fancy Wi-Fi routers. It's secure, and then his
Yep.
boss taught me how to hack them and get in and mess with him on his end, and it always freaked him out.
Yeah, yeah. My youngest son does that now. He's was a white hat.
Yeah. I'm more into the mechanical aspect now. I'm majoring in mechanical engineering, but yeah, it's still pretty cool.
You'll be surprised at the number of mechanical engineers that are radio operators.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They actually have their own network, radio network. They meet. Yeah, it's
Really?
yeah.
Huh.
And
I have to check.
I'm gonna send you a link. There's some amateur radio astronomers too, Jesse. I want to send that to you too.
Okay, sure. That would be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be interested in that. We have some contact with Sarah, which is they do the Hamfest, Society of Amateur Radio Astronomers.
Yeah. Them
Is that who you're talking to?
and AMSAT.
Oh, an AMSAT,
Yeah,
right?
and there's a couple of splinter groups off of AMSAT that do astronomy.
Oh, I would be interested in that too. I think the students would be interested in that. Yeah, if you could send that information to me, that would be great.
Yeah.
That would be really great because right now all I know about is Sarah and hamsci.org they're more solar weather folks. They're more into propagation, and actually there's a couple of events coming up where they're going to be actually using it's in October. They're going to be using um, uh, the eclipse to check HF propagation.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
as the shadow goes across the United States, and you can see this in your book, Logan, there's a whole conversation about the gray line and between night and day, and what happens to the ionosphere.
Yes,
And
yes.
so the cool thing about the eclipse is it's like you have an artificial gray line that scans across the United States, and you can see what happens to the maximum usable frequencies and that kind of thing, and the bands as the shadow of the moon passes over the U.S. So that's what
Oh,
that's what Hamside's doing, and
yeah.
so yeah.
Actually
There's still,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
and there's still you could do Earth, Moon, Earth bouncing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So for the trip out to
Oh yeah.
Pennsylvania, the trip that we're going on, for
Yep.
some reason I can't call that number to make
Huh.
that we were given to do the flight reservations. I've had some problems with my phone where my college campus is, so I can't call that to make to schedule a flight out.
I would recommend sending an email to Ms. Brown
Okay.
and working with her to deal with that, working with her directly. I know she can do he's talking about by the way, Doug, there's a workshop. Hamsci is doing a workshop where yours truly is giving a talk, and the students have been invited, and they're going to pay their way out there, which is, I mean, that works for me. That's great.
Yeah.
So and they're the ones that are doing the experiment with the eclipse. So yeah, I would send the email immediately to Ms. Brown, and she should be in that email that I sent out to everyone, and work with her. And she needs to know if people can't get through on the phone, she needs to know that. That's number
Okay.
one. And number two, see if you can work it with her in email. I think the email actually has her number, so I would give her a call,
Okay.
and work with her to coordinate the trip. Um, so I'm looking forward to seeing you guys out there, you all out there.
Yeah. Is there
Uh,
anyone else going, or is it just me right now?
I think there are two. I heard from the ham side people. They didn't give me names, but they said there are three people going. You're one of the three.
Oh, nice.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, and I think Leonie may be going, although she
Okay.
had to step out early of this meeting, but she's going. And I think she's going, and Sullivan is going. I think,
Okay.
but I'm not sure. I have to check with folks and find out. So this is cool. So yeah, go ahead and talk to Ms. Brown and see if you
Okay.
can work it out with her. Um, well, folks, we're a little bit over. I really want to thank you, Doug. I appreciate you coming out. It's been great. Of course, you know, we're both hams. We could we could be here until 2 a.m.
Right, you.
You know, yakking until 2 a.m. Right? But I really appreciate you coming out. Thanks again. Thanks to Logan for sticking around.
Yeah, of
Does
course.
anybody have anything else they want to add? Okay, all right. Well, we'll stay 7-3s. Thanks all around, and looking forward. I'll be talking to you, Doug, being as how you're a neighbor and all that. So we'll be in touch. Everyone, take good care.
All right.
Thanks
All right.
again. Bye bye.
Be well.